Hello, world history students. This is Mrs. Politsky, and I have your notes for Chapter 31, Section 2, China after World War II. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on here in these days after the war. But just to recap, during the 1930s, the Japanese had invaded China. And at the time that the Japanese invaded China, China was kind of going through a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And once Japan kind of enters into their territory, the Civil War kind of ceases, and all fighting is kind of aimed towards getting rid of the Japanese. Well, the war is over, and it's almost like game on. And what happens is, as the Japanese are kind of removed from mainland China, the Civil War just reignites. And really, from 1945 to about 1949, there's war between the nationalists and the People's Republic of China, or the communist government. Anyway, the United States, uh, when the communists actually are able to win the Civil War, we refuse to recognize People's Republic of China and Mao Zedong as its leader, and we claim that Chiang Kai-shek and his government was the true Chinese government. Just to let you know, when Chiang Kai-shek and his nationalists are in a position where they're not going to win on mainland China, they flee to the island of Formosa, which eventually becomes known as Taiwan. And that is where they still remain today. Anyway, Mao Zedong instituted what is known as the Great Leap Forward, and this was to increase China's agricultural and industrial output. It was a kind of a goal to kind of get China and its economy back in working order. But at the same time, it was also kind of very oppressive, because people who were kind of sympathetic towards the nationalist or sympathetic to democracy in general really found themselves on the outs, and in some cases even being turned over by loved ones and neighbors to the communist government. It was a real difficult time for Chinese. When you talk about this great leap forward, you got to remember there was a propaganda machine kind of at works in China. There was really a depicted, idealized image of China, like you might see in this postcard to the left, where you have the young woman with an abundance of crops that she may be picking. But during the Great Leap Forward, there was a lot of extreme poverty. The goal of the Chinese government was to take people who had been in the cities and to send them back to the rural areas to kind of get closer to the land. And unfortunately, many of these people who were kind of sent off to the countryside really were people who didn't have the skills to kind of raise crops for themselves. And what ends up happening is there is a massive famine that takes place in China. Chinese people going as far as literally going through dung heaps looking for food, which was just beyond anybody's comprehension as far as how awful things were. During this period of time, there was a wide number of people who died. And that's one of the things that we need to kind of keep in the back of our minds during these, I guess you could say, these revolutionary moments where the government is proclaiming, that they're going to be able to take care of people's problems. There was still people who were dying and starving at the hands of the government. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Anyway, number three, Mao ordered the executions of hundreds of thousands of Chinese citizens because he feared that uh, there would be opposition in it, and certainly that made him paranoid. What's weird, some of the people who were the closest to Mao were also some of those who were executed. It was almost like he was paranoid that they were coming for his power. And in a way, Mao and Joseph Stalin have a lot in common, both being communist leaders, but also being threatened by the very people that put him into power. Anyway, the results of the Great Leap Forward were that factories and farms failed to produce enough, and there was widespread famine, and just a real lousy time to be living in China. One thing I do want to note, you notice we have a photograph here at the bottom left-hand corner of these young ladies reading a book, and you might notice the cover of the book is red. During this period of time, there was this belief that the people of China needed to be educated solely by the Red Book. And the Red Book was really kind of the ideas or the ideology of Mao Zedong. In many cases, it actually replaced the curriculum in schools. Kids were taught reading based on this book. They were required to recite passages from it. In some cases, textbooks that were used to teach children about the history of China were thrown away in place of this red book. That if you go back here a couple slides, if I can turn this back, you'll notice that in this piece of propaganda here, there is somebody who's actually holding up the red book. So, needless to say, this is something that obviously is kind of unique to this period of time. All right. The purpose of the Cultural Revolution, which was another 5-year plan that kind of followed the Great Leap Forward, was that Mao was trying to regain some of the power and prestige that he had lost during this Great Leap Forward. In a way, it was kind of like to kind of clean up the bad image. And China became completely isolated due to Mao's harsh treatment of his own citizens and the fact that the failure of the Great Leap Forward led a lot of other nations, including the Soviet Union, to criticize him. And that just further isolated the people of China. Matter of fact, the relationship between China and the Soviet Union broke down completely by the 1960s. Again, you can see these students here that are touting their red book. Just so you know, that was something that you had to carry with you. Anyway, in the years since Mao's death, China passed reforms that have dramatically improved the economy and the standard of living for the Chinese and increased China's participation in the world economy. Just so you know, you can go to Red Square and you see down here at the bottom left hand corner, there is the tomb of Mao, and you can visit him, yes, in that glass casket. It's kind of weird. All right. Thank you very much.